All right, I'm sitting here with Judi Gladstone, founder of SJC, and I'm Malia Muth, a member of SJC, and we're going to talk about this diagram that you created. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, why you created it, and then we'll go into what it's all about.
Sure. So, I struggled for many years about how we as Jews connect to our heritage, and we all do it in different ways. And I tried to create some sort of framework on how to think about that. And so what I tried to accomplish with this diagram is to show sort of the different entry points that each of us may have in one or numerous ways to how we connect to our Jewish heritage. And so there's 6 different ways, and just conveniently in a Jewish star.
That works out.
Yeah, it does work out. So there's 6 different entry points as I see that. 1 is our values, 2 is culture, 3 is beliefs, 4 is history, 5 is language, and 6 is rituals.
Great. You created this as part of your daughter's getting ready for her B'nai Mitzvah, or did it have something to do with that?
No, it was really long before that, and sort of in my process of talking with people about what secular Jewish circle is all about, what our philosophy is, and trying to help others understand sort of the thinking that I had gone through in reading some of the early writers around secular humanistic Judaism and some of the earlier Jewish secular thinkers about what it meant to be Jewish. And that as a secular Jew, it just didn't fit to be a religious Jew and being defined in that way. And so, historically we had a tendency to think that it's our religion that has kept us together, but that never really resonated.
There's a lot of conversation recently around SJC about, okay, we know what we don't believe in, but what do we believe in?
Right.
And so probably this goes a long way to answering those questions.
Well, it does. And one of the things that I found really helpful in defining these 6 different entry points is that for some of us, our connection to our Jewishness is through our beliefs. And so, as a Reformed Jew, that may be expressed through your Reformed Judaism, or as an Orthodox Jew, through the beliefs that are related to Orthodoxy. As a secular Jew, it's really around humanism, because what we care about in our beliefs, what we think about, is about how we relate to each other as human beings, how our morals come from our experience and how we define it. And so, humanism becomes a belief, and whether or not we're Reform or we're Orthodox or humanistic, doesn't necessarily make it so that we're not in the same pool of people. We just have different beliefs. And that just becomes one element for us as Jews. And so what I have found to be really interesting as I've shared this with different people is their sort of experience that, beliefs have never really meant anything to me. And so maybe I felt like less of a Jew because my beliefs weren't Orthodox or my beliefs weren't Reform, when in fact they feel very Jewish because they love eating, lox and bagels, or they love eating chicken soup, or they love the foods at the Seder plate. And that's the entry point of the cultural aspect of it.
Right.
And so the beauty of this framework is it doesn't diminish the value of any entry point. All of them have the same kind of intrinsic value in terms of how we connect to our Jewishness. So for some Jews, it's all about culture, the books that they read, the music that they sing, and the dancing that they do.
Yeah.
And they may have no shared beliefs around any of this, whether it's related to God or not to God, but it's through the culture that they express and they connect to their heritage.
Great. Well, so you've definitely covered culture. What's another point on that star that you've got?
So another point is values. And we have shared values as Jews. Some of them originate from the Torah. Some of them are handed down from our political leaders. And some of them are just historical values. Things like tzedakah, tikkun olam. And for a religious Jew, they'll say, but those are religious. And so these are our expression of our religiosity. But in fact, their beliefs, their values, not beliefs, their values that we have cultivated over time, some of them are not uniquely Jewish.
Right.
But we make them ours because they are important to us. And so it's those shared sense of values. Bal Tashlit is another one, taking care of the earth. And things that we think are important, taking care of our elderly, that we pass on to our children, regardless of what their origins are.
Right.
And those become our values, and that's another entry point, and we share in those values. And, to me, tzedakah is one, and tikkun olam, those are the two that I think probably most Jewish people really relate strongly to, regardless of what their origins are.
That's really true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So another point that I think is important to some, but not at all important to others, is ritual. Mm-hmm. And some people equate religion or rituals with religion and beliefs, but you can separate the two, because you can experience the ritual regardless of what your belief is. It's just the liturgy is going to be different. So in a secular humanistic bar bat mitzvah, we carry out all the same rituals, but the words that we have around them and their significance in them may change a little bit, but the rituals there. Shabbat is the same thing.
Right.
Right? The ritual is there.
Right.
Language is another. And for some folks, language is part of culture. But for Jewish people, our connection through language, and that connects us, whether it's Hebrew, whether it's Yiddish or Ladino, it has influences from other places that we've lived. So we kind of carry with it a little bit of where our geography has taken us, but it binds us together.
And it's such an emotional topic. That language is so emotional.
It is.
Yes.
And it's partly because it kind of keeps other people out. Implicitly.
Truly.
Right. Think about our parents who spoke Yiddish,
right?
They did it because they didn't want the kids to know what they were talking about.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. So the last point of entry that I associate with a connection to our Jewish heritage is our history. It's our shared connection and affinity for our ancestry, for events that bind us, things like the Holocaust, things like the existence of Israel, like the Exodus. And to me, this one always felt like it was immersed in a sense of peoplehood. But it wasn't until I spoke to a group of seniors where I really had a renewed appreciation for what entry through this portal was, when this elderly woman who was a Holocaust survivor came up to me and she said, I never really couldn't understand why I felt Jewish. Because my only connection is because I survived the Holocaust. She had no other sense of connection through these other points. And for her, it was sort of this rejuvenation of, oh, I get it. I see why I feel so connected to Jewish people, because I have this shared sense of history.
Right.
And so by defining it in this framework, it helps us to have an appreciation for what makes us Jewish. It's not just because of our religious expression. It has to do with the books we read and the food we eat. It has to do with the values that we teach our children and the values that we express for ourselves. It has to do with the rituals of honoring Shabbat, regardless of whether it's a very God-oriented text or not. It has to do with passing on language to each other, and it has to do with our sense of a shared history. And that's what it means to be Jewish and how we connect to our Jewish heritage.
Absolutely. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really interesting explanation of this wonderful set of portals into our culture, history, values, rituals, and beliefs. Thank you so much for explaining that to us.
Yeah, thanks for asking.